When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be doing Jon IV. Now, something I noticed when I read Jon IV is Jon IV feels a lot like Dany III, where the two chapters, it feels like it's this mini conclusion to their starting arcs, where these characters have been growing into the people they are. And Dany and Jon, at the beginning of the story, are vastly different characters, just in personality and what their strengths are. But their arcs are very similar, where Dany, we see in her chapter, she's finally kind of committing to the Dothraki culture. She is becoming more comfortable with her role. She's gaining more confidence. This chapter is really all about showing what Jon learned from the last chapter, where he's becoming more in tune with himself. He is helping people. He's not looking down on his fellow brothers. He's coming more into this idea of being a watchman and just kind of getting rid of his old family. Now, not, forgetting them, but realizing his situation and buying in. That's kind of what this chapter is about. And we also get the introduction of, as you can see on the screen, a pretty impactful character in Samwell. And we'll see how Jon deals with that situation. But this is a massive chapter for Jon. It's my favorite chapter of his so far. And whereas other chapters, I feel like we've seen Jon leaning on other main supporting characters. So, for instance, in a lot of the chapters, we see him with Tyrion. We see him with Tyrion 1. We see him in Jon 1. We see him in Jon 3. In Jon 2, we see kind of some other main supporting characters with Jon as well, like Catelyn and Arya. This is kind of the first Jon, it's just Jon really in this chapter. Sure, we're introduced into Sam, but this is Jon's first big chapter for me, where it's just to focus on his character as a whole. So let's get into it. We are on page 259. Let me switch that over real quick. And also, while I'm doing this, before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach your appeal. I like this content as well. And let's get into it. Also, this is a very long chapter as well, so stay tuned. This may be a long one. So the page opens with Jon drilling and teaching Daeron how to fight better. Instantly, we see the impact of the results of what happened in the last chapter for Jon. Think about the last chapter. Jon was this person that he was not wanting to help people. He was beating them, and he was enjoying it. Now he's helping people get better. We see this with multiple characters throughout, where Jon instinctively knows how everyone fights, and he's trying to help them. And this is just one of those cases at the beginning. And this is interrupted when Daeron says, "What in the seven hells?" as he looks and sees the fattest boy Jon has ever seen. He is nervously walking towards their group and says to no one in particular, "I was told to come here and train." So we see a couple things right off the bat. Being fat in this world is definitely looked down upon for a few reasons. In this world, think about plenty. There are not a lot of families that are going to be able to eat anything they want, have enough to even get fat. So when you think about a lot of the people at the Night's Watch who are of lower class, who maybe they stole to just survive and they got caught, or they got basically committed for a crime that maybe they weren't guilty of. We see that with Daeron later on, where apparently he was in bed with Lord Rowan's daughter, and he says it was consensual, mutual between the two. But that's not the case when it comes to what Rowan said, or Lord Rowan says, and also his daughter said basically he raped her. So the big thing here is people are definitely going to look down upon Sam because of not just that aspect. Think about our own real world, right? Someone being maybe more overweight or fat, unfortunately and sadly, this is a sad reality, is they are more prone to get, say, bullied in like a high school setting or a school setting. It shouldn't be that way, but that is how it is. And that's something that, personally myself, I can kind of relate to, because I was, a very big kid, especially when I was younger. The body weight that you guys are looking at me right now is below what my body weight was like in 6th grade. So just put that into perspective. So I definitely can understand what Sam's going through. And then Sam also, to build upon that, he also brings a lot of nervous energy. He's coming up with kind of not a lot of pride, it would feel like. He's coming up very scared. And can we really blame Sam? I know us as the audience, people that have read the books, know what Sam's background is. But even regardless, he is someone that, if you're looking through Jon's eyes, is very new to the watch. He doesn't seem to fit in right off the get-go. This is kind of a big moment for Sam, as well as he knows no one here as well. Now, Pip notes that the guy must be a lordling and that his accent would imply somewhere from the south near Highgarden. We also learn that Pip had traveled the Seven Kingdoms and knew accents well, and we know that Pip is right. Hornhill is very close to Highgarden, so again, he is right on that point of view. So let's get into page 260. So moving on, Jon notes that the striding huntsman is on his breast, which we know is the sigil for House Tarly, but he is not sure who that is as of right now. Jon notes that he doesn't know what house this is, which is another thing that's kind of interesting. We do see later on that knowing sigils and knowing house words is something that's important to your upbringing. Knowing all of these houses is very important. Now, I would say for the North, right, for the Starks, it'd be more important to know your bannermen. But again, it is interesting that Jon doesn't note the Tarleys, who are a very prominent family. Maybe it shows kind of that educational difference between maybe, say, someone like Jon and like maybe Bran and Robb being brought up. Alistair then starts tearing into their new recruits, saying they must have run short of thieves and criminals, and now they send pigs. And he continues calling him the Lord of Ham. And again, this is very different than the way we see in the show, where the show, Sam kind of walks up and he's kind of got what we see on in the background image, where he's kind of very similar to everybody else. Maybe he doesn't have the dark colors yet, but he kind of blends in. In the books, it's not like that at all. He's walking up in armor. He's very much decked out in the Tarly sigil and stuff like that. And he's not in the Night's Watch black, so he has to basically go get rearmed. And we see another issue because this takes apparently a good portion of the morning trying to get armor to fit him. And by the end of it, when they finally get everything good to go, he kind of looks like an overcooked sausage. Again, giving this idea that Sam does not fit into this world. Why is he here? And that's something that's very interesting to think about. And basically, Thorn wants to see what Sam can do. And Thorn puts him up against a very muscular Halder, who is also 16. He's actually older than Jon. And I think this shows a lot about Thorn's teaching. Thorn could have given Sam a much easier person to try and go up against. But he gives him somebody that hits harder than anyone in Jon's mind. And Jon would know. He fights all of these people regularly and trains with them. So Thorn gives Sam probably one of the hardest people he could go up against, besides maybe Jon. And we're going to see how that doesn't go well for Sam. But it shows that Thorn really doesn't understand how to teach people. And I will say, when we get to Thorn later in this chapter, Thorn is put into an odd situation. Like, how do you train someone that doesn't want to be trained, that doesn't want to fight? How do you do that? And I think Thorn goes about it the wrong way, but he is in a tough situation. So, we also learn that Halder was a stone mason, adding to how muscular and strong he is. And Pip makes a comment, this isn't going to be pretty, and it doesn't go well. The fight did not even last a minute, as Sam is on his back, yielding. And Ras and some of the other boys are now laughing, which I find interesting. I noted this in my notes that if we go back to a chapter, all of these recruits that are laughing at Sam were maybe not just like Sam, but Jon was beating the crap out of them. He was making them look horrible in Thorn's eyes. And now that they're not the ones in pain, they're not the ones suffering, they laugh at people that were in their situation. I think it's a very interesting idea, that's something that's very prominent in the Song of Ice and Fire. It's okay to laugh when it's not you, but if it's you, we should feel bad for you. It's interesting the way that shifts, and we see that very prominently here. And I think that is something that also prompts Jon to try and help Sam, because Sam, for a lot of reasons, is different than the other recruits that Jon was going against, like Ras, like Gren, like Pip, like all of these people. But at the same time, he's someone that finds himself discarded from the world. He's someone that isn't trained to really have a sword fighting ability, which is the same for everybody else that is here. So again, I thought that was very interesting. Thorn then tells Sam to get up. but he doesn't. And Thorn instructs Halder to hit him with the flat of the blade until he gets up. To which Halder gives him a little hit at first, and Thorn tells him to hit him harder. And it appears Halder hits him at full strength, and the recruit yells in pain. And that gets into page 261, but again, is this the right way to try and teach Sam how to sword fight? I get it, right? You want Sam to be able to get back up, to be able to do these things, but he just isn't. And to me, this just is not the way to do it. And I think another thing that I want to talk about with the Night's Watch, that I get the Night's Watch's process is it's a very good one, right? It's, you don't know who any of these people are. They're all from all across the world, and you want to train them. And you want to figure out what their skills are so you can kind of figure out where to put all these people. But my thing is, right, when you have people that you can tell obviously are not good swords fighters, why keep training them? Like, why does it take so long to figure out what to put Sam in? Right away, I know, right, they want everyone to somewhat be trained in fighting, but it kind of seems like a waste, you know, battering Sam up really for almost no reason, because Sam is not going to get anything out of this. Why not just instantly put Sam in some other position, like a steward, like something else, put him in those ideas, but basically make him to where Jon notes that, like, they have two things they really do. In the mornings, they have swordplay. In the afternoons, they have their work. So this could be anything, right? They're trying to train them, see what they're good at. Why not just make Sam someone that does all of these jobs every day, just not swordplay? It makes more sense, and you can identify Sam's skills a bit better. That's something that I think is interesting that the Night's Watch doesn't really adapt with. They just make their people go through this training that maybe isn't beneficial to a lot of the people that aren't even going to become, say, rangers. They're going to just stay as either stewards or builders. And this has kind of just been enough for Jon. As we get into this page, he's tired of seeing this. Jon doesn't like seeing defenseless people who have yielded getting hit. And Pip, you know, tries to hold him back, saying, "Don't." And the recruit tries to get up and then falls again. Halder is instructed to hit him once again. And Jon finally steps in, saying that this is enough. There's no honor in hitting him while he's down, and yielded. Thorn, I think rightly so. I think this is a lot of reasons why Thorn is very resentful, is that people undermine his power. And they wouldn't need to if Thorn knew how to rule over his recruits better. But Thorn says that he is the master of arms, not Jon, which is true, but Jon shouldn't need to step in because Thorn is doing something that's obviously just kind of stupid. And again, I do want to note, like, Thorn is in a difficult position. Sam is obviously a coward. He lacks any real skills. It's a tough job of trying to train him. And that's why I said, like, I don't think this part of the training is necessary for someone like Sam, who obviously shows no ability to be able to sword fight. Maybe put him into archery or shooting a crossbow. Those are things that I think are more beneficial to someone like Sam. Now, Jon helps Sam up, and Alistair deems to make it an exercise of this, as he tells Jon to show him his steel. And Thorn sends Rast and Albert and Halder against Jon in a 3-on-1. And Jon thinks he's going to be very bruised tonight, but before it can start, Pip and Gren also join in to help Jon, again showing how people are now friends with Jon. Jon is fairly popular, and that people are willing to fight with him. Again, a massive switch up from Jon 3, where some of these people were willing to kill Jon because of how he was. So I really wanted to really hammer in that point that that's a very big growing point for Jon in this chapter. Thorn then asks what they are waiting for, and Jon goes on the attack, not waiting. He attacks Halder. He takes probably the biggest threat of the three. And he recounts how Roderick always told him to know his enemy, and Jon knows that Halder is a violent and brutally strong, but lacked any patience or defense. Now, this kind of does remind me a bit of someone like Robert Baratheon, who's extremely strong, but maybe he doesn't have the most patience or defense. This kind of does remind me a little bit of Robert. And that gets us into page 262. Jon then begins attacking and hits Halder in the ribs. Halder definitely felt it because he gives somewhat of a painful grunt. He then counterattacks. Halder then kind of does a little bit of a counterattack and ends up hitting Jon on the shoulder, which definitely hurt. Jon will have some issues with that later on in the chapter, but Jon counterattacks and gets Halder off of his feet. Jon inspects the other duels and he sees Gren is holding his own against Albert, but Pip is hard at work struggling against Rast. Again, Rast is someone that is older by 2 years over Pip and also is 40 pounds heavier, so this is kind of a mismatch in really every regard. But what I think is interesting is that Jon simply goes up behind Rast and knocks him to the ground. So again, we understand that in war, this is very common. But from an honor sense, right, there was 3 individual duels going on. Jon kind of intercedes into this duel. It's a weird thing because this isn't the honorable approach, right? I don't know. I thought that was a little weird that Jon does that. And I thought, this could be a note of, well, think about Arthur Dayne, right? When we look at the Arthur Dayne situation, we know that Arthur Dayne and the other 2 Kingsguard there would have been outnumbered numbers-wise. So could this be somewhat of a foreshadowing to how probably Arthur Dayne died, where it probably was not an honorable way that he went out? Possible. And especially when we look at the idea that Pip could be Ned Stark and Arthur Dayne being Rast, where Rast is just better than Pip, has all of the advantages. Could be another similar idea, and then someone comes up behind and kills Arthur Dayne. But at the same time, Gren then defeats Albert, and the fighting is over. Thorne calls a halt to this mummer's farce. Halder then tells Jon he thought he had him for once, and Jon replies he almost did, as he notes the pain and bruising that is in his shoulder. Jon tries to take off his helm, so again, he's having a lot of shoulder pain. He tries to remove his helm, and he kind of can't. He kind of stops there for a second, and a voice says, "Let me help you," and that is of the new recruit. Jon still does not know his name yet, but he goes to help him. And he asks Jon if he is hurt, to which Jon shrugs it off. He's been, hurt before. He's had bruising before. But the new recruit then somewhat, again, awkwardly says he is Samwell Tarly and used to be of Hornhill, and he is the son of Randall Tarly, bannerman of House Tyrell, and he used to be the heir to Randall. Until Jon interrupts saying, "I am Ned Stark's bastard." So again, let's think about this. Jon, so far in those first 3 chapters, hated being called a bastard. He would get very angry and make people try to stop saying it. Now he's openly embracing it. That's how he's introducing himself to Sam. It shows a lot of that personal growth that we've been talking about with Jon. And that gets us into page 263. Moving on, Samwell continues by saying that he can call him Sam if he wishes to which Pip pipes in saying, "You can call him Lord Snow." As Jon tells Sam this is Gren and Pip, and Gren and Pip kind of have a little bit of an argument where Pip calls Gren the ugly one, and Gren calls Pip the one with the bat ears, which I thought was very interesting on the bat ears part. And Gren wants to know why he would not stand up, and Sam says he wanted to, but he was afraid of getting hit more, and that he is a coward. And Jon instantly thinks, why would anyone openly admit that? Think about how many people we see in A Song of Ice and Fire who are cowards, but they don't basically say they are. They will play that they are the hero. It's something Jon's going to notice in this chapter. But think about someone like Janos Slynt. Janos Slynt is someone that is inherently a coward, but he plays himself up to be this courageous, very powerful figure when he isn't. So I thought that was an interesting reference to someone we'll see on later on in the story. And almost reading their minds, Sam says he is sorry the way he is, but Jon tells him he is hurt and will do better tomorrow. Sam then, with tears in his eyes, says no he won't. He never does. This gives us a little bit of a backstory. We can kind of infer what Sam has gone through, where Sam is highborn, it would appear, and he probably has had experience with trying to be trained and not doing any better. That's a nice little key into what his backstory is before we get told by it later on in this chapter. After Sam leaves, Gren notes that no one likes a craven, and they wish they had not, or that he wishes they had not stood up for him. People will think they are cravens too. Again, which is another odd thought. So because the 3 of them stood up to Thorne's commands and they fought for Sam, they are now going to be called cowards because they were kind, but they also had a lot of bravery going up against Rast, and these are especially for someone like Pip, where Rast was a clear skill advantage above him, just physically based on being older and having more weight to him, being stronger. It's very interesting the way we see in A Song of Ice and Fire, people will worry about that. Who you hang around will reflect on you, which is somewhat true, right? If you look at nowadays, you can tell a lot about a person by who their friends are. Something that I have, started to look at is if you're going after a romantic partner, a lot of the times you should look at who their friends are because it will reflect a lot of their values. So I think there's truth to what Gren is saying, but I think at the same time it's very ironic just based upon what they just did that proved they weren't cravens. Pip then says, "You're too stupid to be a craven," and the two basically start to argue while Jon heads back to the armory to put his things away. And again, this is where Jon gets into that point I was making earlier where he talks about the routine for a Night's Watchman recruit, where in the morning they would have sword play and they would have work in the afternoon. And again, this is what is done to assess what the recruits are good at, which I think is a fairly good system. I think it should be open to a bit more interpretation. I think when you're seeing recruits that obviously have no swordplay talent, why continue train them? Just put them in situations where they can succeed at the wall into other duties. And that gets us into page 264. Jon then kind of begins to know what his usual duties are. His favorite is being sent out to hunt, and then he has to sometimes work with Noy in the forges. He gets to stand guard, run messages, or even work with the Ravens and Maester Aemon. So again, a lot of different types of skills being used here to kind of assess what you are good at. And today he was sent up with crushed rock for the pathways on the wall. Again, something that Tyrion foreshadowed in his second to last chapter that we got. And again, this seems like a very dull job. You're kind of just going on the top of a wall, just putting crushed rocks or stone down. Doesn't seem like the most interesting job, but again, someone has to do it. Jon notes this job is lonely, even with the ghost, but it gives him a lot of time to think, and he recounts meeting Samwell and thinks of Tyrion as well, which again, it makes a lot of sense why he would. Tyrion is this character that physically is disadvantaged, and Samwell is very similar to that, where the two, Samwell and Tyrion, are judged by their appearance quite a lot. Now, the two are vastly different when it comes to their personalities, but it's something that Jon is going to think about. And Jon specifically remembers how Tyrion said that most men would rather deny a hard truth than face it, which Jon thinks about Sam. Sam is willing to face that he's a coward. He's willing to say that. He doesn't hide that. He has the courage to say that, which is somewhat of courage itself that Sam doesn't realize he has, that he will find later. And again, I think this is very interesting from Jon, because Jon is a character that is now thinking about other people, thinking about what motivates other people, and he's thinking about people other than himself. He's not being as selfish as he was at the beginning of the story. I think that's a really big character building, and it shows how much of an impact people like Tyrion and Donal Noy have had on him. Jon eventually does finish doing the pass, even though it takes a while because of his injured shoulder, but eventually he gets done and signals down. By the time he gets to dinner, everyone has already eaten, and Pip is in the middle of one of his stories, of which he plays all the parts to everyone's delight. Which again, I think makes sense, right? There's not a lot of entertainment up here at the wall. You would want someone that's very entertaining to entertain you, to have some sort of enjoyment while you're kind of off. You're not doing any of your duties, you're just eating. So page 265 now has us inside of the hall, and Jon normally goes to sit with his friends, but he sees that Sam is sitting all alone eating his pies. And Jon goes over to him and decides to sit with him, just being the good guy Jon is. And Sam asks, he's kind of a little bit afraid, but he asks, "Is that a wolf?" And Jon says his name is Ghost, and that he is a dire wolf, the sigil of his house. To which Sam notes his is a huntsman. And Jon, kind of, I guess, wondering or just curious, asks, "Do you like to hunt?" And Sam says he hates it. Jon then notes looks like he's going to cry. And Jon asks what's the matter, to which there's no reply, and Jon tells him to come outside. Now Sam asks why. Jon says to talk and asks if Sam has seen the wall, which is a kind of a weird question when you think about it, because it's like, how would he have not seen the wall? I mean, you can see it from miles and miles off. Now, what I think Jon more meant here is like, have you seen the wall but being on top of it? Because that's a completely different story, which Sam has not yet. He hasn't had to do, wall duty or guard duty up there. So I do think it's interesting the way that kind of works out. I think it's interesting the way that is brought up a bit later about how Sam is also afraid of heights. So their conversation starts to now go outside, and Sam says he never thought it would be like this. It is so cold, and that the buildings are all falling apart. Jon says he must have been from a place that was much warmer where he came from. And Sam says he has never even seen snow until recently. Again, pointing out the weird seasons of A Song of Ice and Fire, where Sam, who has been living in the South, has never seen snow. It seems very odd to someone like me, for instance, where I live in the Midwest of the United States, so I pretty much get all of the seasons pretty balanced. And, to think about it, that Sam has gone so many years of his life without seeing snow is kind of crazy, especially when you look at how the North and their snows are so bad. That must seem extremely weird to someone like Jon, who's very used to the snow at this point. Now, something else I thought is a little interesting here is, again, the idea that Sam was not really given the full context of what the Night's Watch is. Very similar to Jon. The two were expecting different things, and when Sam gets here, it's not this noble place. The wall is falling apart. Not the wall, but the Night's Watch is falling apart. They're manning so few castles. It's extremely cold up here, beyond even Sam's imagination. So I do think it's interesting when you come at it from that point of view, that Sam and Jon, again, have another similarity, which is something I think helps them kind of bond and become friends, and or by the end of the chapter, brothers. But that leads us into page 266. Jon then looks at the wall looming above, and Sam asks if he will have to go up there. He will die if he has to climb it. Now, this is interesting for a couple points, because we know that Jon eventually will have to climb the wall in A Storm of Swords. But two, the idea that Sam thinks, you're going to have to either walk all the way up that wall or you're going to have to climb it just to get to the top, it's kind of interesting. Again, it shows you another facet of how Sam really doesn't understand how the wall would work. So I thought that was something that was interesting. But Jon notes that there is a winch to pull you up, but Sam says he is afraid of heights. Again, at this point, I think Jon is just really frustrated. I mean, every interaction that he's had with Sam has involved Sam just being afraid of everything. He's now afraid of heights. He doesn't like the cold. He doesn't like hunting. He doesn't like the swordplay. Anything that in this world would be considered manly, Sam is kind of afraid of those things. And it's something that's great for Sam's character arc as he goes forward. Now, again, Jon basically says, are you afraid of everything? If you are a craven, why would you join the Night's Watch? Again, that's a great point, because it's got to be this looming thing in the back of Jon's mind. Why would he come here? Because it doesn't seem like Sam is a criminal. There wasn't like he was being taken here against his will, even though it kind of was. He was very much forced to go here. He doesn't really arrive like a criminal, right? He has, the sigil of his house on his breast. It's interesting the way Jon has to try and decipher why he's here, if he's quite clearly the opposite of what man should be here. Sam then looks over Jon for a moment and begins to cry, going to the ground. Again, Jon doesn't really know what to do in this moment, and I think Jon, maybe he doesn't realize it, or maybe he does, we don't really get inside of his head too much on this point, is that I think Jon realizes he's probably hit a nerve here. Because there's something that, again, Sam has already said he's a craven, but I think it's the idea of why would you join the Night's Watch that really stings Sam, because he has to kind of remember kind of his father's betrayal and how he was really abandoned and kicked to this awful life. And again, Jon doesn't know what to do, but we have this really, really awesome moment, and it's a really cute moment where Sam's crying on the ground, and Ghost goes up to Sam and comforts him, kind of licking the tears off of his cheek. It startles Sam. I mean, I think it would startle anybody. You have this direwolf coming right up to your face and licking tears off of you. It would startle you for a second, but again, then Sam starts to laugh. Jon then also goes down with him and sits next to him, also laughing. Again, bonding over this very odd moment, but it's kind of this idea that we see with the direwolves, that they're able to kind of tell what people are good, what people are bad, who are your enemies, who are your friends, as Ghost has no problems with Samwell. He goes right up to him. Jon then begins talking about how he and Robb found the pups in of Winterfell. He even notes how he had a dream of being in a long, empty hall and no one is there. And sometimes he is searching for Ned or Robb or Arya or Benjen, but no one is ever there. For one, again, this shows how Jon misses his home and his family, but also by book 3, all of these characters are going to either be dead or missing except for Arya. Is this foreshadowing that somehow Arya will die? I think it's an interesting little point here, because you could be making this observation that Jon is really in a position where he can't help them. And the one thing that I think builds upon this is that the ending point of where Jon gets in these dreams is the Winterfell crypts, which again would suggest the idea that these characters are dead. So is Jon subconsciously thinking this and thinking maybe he's going to be nowhere to help any of these people and they're going to die and he can't help them? That could be interesting, because that's what ends up happening, right? Jon, for right now, is helpless to help Ned or Jon or Ned or Robb or even Benjen further in the wall. Even when they go out, Jon really isn't a help to Benjen or finding out what happened. Arya is interesting. Is this foreshadowing to her death later on in the series? And will it be a situation where Jon is helpless to save her? This could be something that Jon remembers from his dreams in book 1, where he sees Alice Karstark, or in his head, Arya, stumbling around, or where he gets this prophecy by Mel and how she says it's Arya, but it's actually Alice Karstark. Could this be a moment where Jon is realizing kind of what this dream means and if he stands by and is helpless, she could die? I don't know. I think it's something just to think about. Jon then finishes the page thinking of how Benjen is still missing and that Mormont has sent out rangers to find him. So again, page 267 is going to be a page that I just got done reading for my Benjen video, and we're going to learn all about where Benjen went and how his mission maybe wasn't successful. Page 267 starts with Jon thinking that, again, people have been sent out to look for Benjen. Riker and Corran Halfhand have been sent out to look for Benjen, and they have seen his marks. They followed his trail, but apparently he was lost in the northwest stony highlands, and nothing else is known about his whereabouts. So again, I've talked about this, or I'm going to talk about this in a video this week on Thursday about his actual whereabouts. And the best conclusion I can make is that he probably went through the haunted forest and actually found, because he was going after Waymore Royce, and they were kind of deep into the haunted forest, so he probably went in, found that, and they kept going, and then they probably got ambushed, is what I would assume, and that is why the marks stop. Sam then asks if he ever finds anyone in his dream, but Jon says no, it is always empty, and he notes that he has never told anyone these dreams, but it feels good to. Jon then recounts how everything is empty, and eventually he makes it to the crypts, again implying that everyone he knows or that he loves and the people closest to him is going to die. That is why we're going to the crypts. He struggles with not going in because he is not a Stark, but is pulled in to enter. Anyway, again, this is more foreshadowing that Jon is, one, destined to be probably King of the North, or at least the person in charge of the North as we get into Winds of Winter. And also this idea that Jon is a legit Stark. Everything is telling him in his head that he isn't one. Catelyn has told him he isn't a Stark, really. That he is not the same as someone like Robb, but he's still pulled in anyway. And this is more foreshadowing to either Ned being his father or Lyanna being his mother. And whenever he enters the crypts, he wakes. Jon then flips the subject, asking Sam if he ever dreams of Hornhill, and he says no, he hated it there. And you can definitely tell that Jon has hit a nerve. Sam kind of goes quiet, and everything goes still for a second. And even Jon, I feel like, can tell that he hit a nerve here. And Jon just stays quiet, letting Sam talk, and he's definitely playing into that idea of a quiet wolf, just like Ned. And Jon, again, recounting, because we don't hear it like as in Sam telling this. It's more like Jon is basically remembering what Sam said in this story. So it's kind of a different way of presenting that information than it is like on the show. Where the show, we actually do get the conversation of what happened. Whereas Jon is just kind of recounting what Sam has told him. Jon figures out why Sam is on the wall. He learns that House Tarly is sworn to House Tyrell, and specifically Mace Tyrell, the Warden of the South, from the richest family in Westeros. He learns that Sam was his father's, Randall Tarly's, heir, and that Sam was set to inherit all of the lands and titles and the two-handed steel greatsword Heartsbane of his father. Again, we are seeing certain parallels between Sam and Jon. Jon is a person that is a bastard, but he feels like he is one of them, but not one of them at the same time. And Jon is someone that isn't going to inherit any of the things like Robb will. And Sam is someone that was set to inherit all of these things, but he's got pushed out of it. So again, these are two people that feel like they've been kind of cast out and that they are different and not part of the family. And that leads us into page 268. So continuing on here with the story, we see how Sam grew up and how tragic it really was. Sam is someone that, when you just describe him, if you take out that he is plump and fat or whatever, he sounds kind of similar to Rhaegar. He is someone that liked to read books, he liked music, he liked the kitchens and playing in the kitchens. But as he grew older, he became more plump, he hated the sight of blood, and Lord Tarly tried many different Master of Arms, and they had no real effect on Sam. One of them tried making him sleep in chainmail to kind of strengthen and muscle him up. It did not work. Another made him dress up in women's clothes to kind of shame him, I guess, into having more courage. And that only really made him more frightened. Now, I want to show you guys what lengths Randall really goes to get Samwell to become this quote-unquote man, and how it's seen in this world, because we have this idea that men have to be this certain quality. If they're not, great at sword fighting, if they're not loving hunting and all these things, they're not a man. If you like to read, you're not a man. I think that's very interesting, and that's really spotlighted here with Sam, because Randall went so far that he had 2 warlocks from Karth try basically type of blood magic to try and get rid of Sam's fear, which did nothing but get him sick. Again, it just teaches us all the ideas of actual toxic masculinity in this world, that men have to be this or else you're useless and you're discarded by your family. And this all changed when Lady Tarth birthed a second son. All the attention was taken away from Sam because, again, at this point, Sam was the only male heir. He was the only one Randall had to inherit his lands, so he was trying to properly train him up. But when Randall sees the opportunity of a second son that is probably going to be better than Sam in all of the aspects that Randall wants, he's kind of free to just leave Sam alone. And for a while, Sam is left alone to read and do music until he turns 15. He is woken to his saddle packed and was escorted by 3 men to his father, who was skinning a deer. Again, the scene is very similar to kind of what we see with Tywin. If we think about the show, it's very similar in the aspect of it. Randall is trying to basically show off of his power and what he will do to Sam if he does not follow through. He tells Sam that he is not fit to wield Heartsbane or inherit his lands, and he will now be forced to take the Black. Now, I noticed this when I was kind of writing down my notes, and it kind of struck me. Why does Randall do this? Why doesn't Randall simply just disinherit Sam? He could just as easily get some sort of pardon to make all of his land go to his second-born son, and he could, at the same time as doing that, just kick Sam out, make Sam have to live off of his own back, not live at Hornhill anymore. That does not mean forcing him to take the Watch. Or, if we even look at what Sam's actual talents are, why doesn't he send Sam to become a maester? We know that in the South, and specifically this region, they are very in tune with, say, the Seven, or hell, they could try and make Sam a Septon as well. There's so many opportunities that are better lives for Sam and what he enjoys than sending him to the Watch, where it's pretty much sure he'll die. And this comes down to a very similar idea of Tywin and Tyrion, is Randall and Sam, because Randall, in my opinion, does this not just because he wants Sam out of the way. It's out of spite. Randall is pissed off that Sam has turned out this way, that this is his blood, a stain on his precious legacy. And again, Again, the logical choice would not be to send him to the Watch. There's so many better things they could do with Samwell. There's so many ways to get away the inheritance type thing. So again, I think this is very cruel, and it shows who Randall Tarley is, and it kind of introduces, this is kind of the prelude to the Tywin and Tyrion plot, in my opinion. That gets us into page 269. Sam then was basically told to do this, or else there would be a hunt, and somewhere in these woods his horse would fall and you would die. Or Randall would basically just hunt him down and kill him, and that is what he would tell his mother. Again, Randall going to great lengths to see that what he wants is done. And all the while, as Sam told this story to Jon, he seemed very calm and cool. He wasn't crying, he didn't seem emotional. It again shows this weird courage that Sam does have, that he is willing to be honest, to talk about things that many people probably wouldn't talk about. Jon then says they should return to the hall, but Sam asks why. But Jon tells them there is a warm cider or mulled wine to warm them, and Daeron sometimes sings for them since he was an apprentice singer. Now, it's very interesting that Sam asks why to go back to the hall when Sam doesn't like the cold. And we've been outside for quite a bit now, but Sam even questions it. I think that's very interesting that this conversation and them actually, having some sort of connection has actually distracted Sam from this cold that he hates. Sam asks how he even got here, to which apparently Daeron was found dead with Lord Rowan of Golden Grove's daughter. Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier on in this chapter review, but apparently the daughter pleaded rape, but Daeron said she helped him basically through the window. So it's one of these cases where the Lord has more power in the situation. Daeron was kind of more just of a common, middle class to lower class person. The Lord is going to side with the side that basically makes his daughter a bit more innocent, right? She didn't try to engage in this sexual conduct. It was actually this dude who raped her. It looks way better for Lord Rowan in this regard, and that's just how it is. That's the problem with these systems, is that there isn't really this court system that allows Daeron to maybe provide evidence of it being consensual. Sam said he would love to basically hear Daeron and Pip in their singing, but he would not be wanted there, and that Thorn will make him fight again, won't he? Jon finishes this page by saying he will. And that gets us into page 270. And again, the thing I want to note here is that Sam still feels like an outcast, that people hate him because of him being a craven and that he's fat, which to a degree he's right. These people are making fun of him because of those things. And Sam declines the offer by Jon and decides to go to sleep. Jon returns to the hall and is asked where he has been. And like we just got done talking about, Sam feels like he's not wanted. That's exactly what starts happening. Jon says that he was with Sam, and everyone starts making fun of him for either being fat or for being too afraid to sit down with them. And Jon has had enough. He angrily tells them to stop, which makes them go silent. Again, it shows that Jon has gained their respect, and that Jon is well liked here because people will listen to him. And Jon convinces them all to not hurt Sam, either by convincing, threatening, or even shaming others, all but Rast, who notes that if he goes up against him, he is going to slice some bacon off. And that leads us to the kind of last little part of this, is I'm going to change the background image. But I just wanted to say, I really couldn't find any good images of Ghost when he's on top of Rast from the show. This is the best I could find, and it is like, you can definitely see the quality from season 1 to later seasons on Ghost's appearance. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, continuing on, we see that later that night, Jon, Gren, and Pip go to visit Rast's cell. Gren and Pip hold him down as Ghost leaps onto his chest and begins to nip at his throat, just enough to draw blood. And Jon says, "Remember, we know where you sleep." Again, I thought this was very interesting, and it's great storytelling from George R. R. Martin. Because if we go back to Jon 3, Don Noy was saying this is what was going to happen to Jon if he kept being like he was. He was being an arrogant, narcissistic type of person who looked down on people. And look at what happens now when Rast is this person that's not going along with what other people want him to do, and he's become this person that has a target on his back. This is what happens. Maybe somebody comes visit you at night and kills you because they don't like you. Again, great storytelling. It shows Jon's growth as he has switched places with Thrast. And I just wanted to note that, right? You know, as we come to the end of this chapter, his and Dany's chapters, the last two for Jon and Dany, have been fantastic in concluding their kind of mini arcs of really the first third of the book. And the next morning, Ras is heard to be telling Albert and Toad that he nicked himself while shaving, which explains the marks at his throat. And from that day forward, no one hurt Sam. If they were paired against him, they would stand their ground and swat his attacks away. And when pressured by Thorn, they would lightly hit his breastplate. And that gets us into page 271. And now we finally see that Sam has gotten the courage to sit with them and becoming one of them. Sam, again, is this person that is not dumb, right? For all of Sam's faults, he understands what Jon did for him. And he goes up to him and says, I don't know what you did, but thank you for what he did. And the end of this chapter is basically about, you know, Sam saying, you know, I've never really had a true friend. And Jon says, no, we aren't friends. We are brothers. That's a very powerful moment to me. Whereas, you know, we saw with like Robb and Bran, they have this powerful moment of bonding as they come together as brothers. This is now Jon accepting who his new family is in the Night's Watch and accepting that role. And Jon really now feels like he's coming into his own here and really adapting to this lifestyle. And he's helping, you know, people that need it. And I think this is just a great arc for Jon. It's one of my favorite chapters of the first book because it establishes, you know, such a great dynamic with Sam and Jon. But not only that, it's really the completion of Jon's first arc, like I talked about a couple times in this chapter in this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed this longer video. I know this one's probably going to be a bit longer just based upon how many pages of notes I had. And just at the end of this video, I just wanted to say, you know, I hope you guys really do like this content, because I know it takes much longer than most of my videos. I had 10 pages of notes for this video, so yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy it, and I will see you guys all in the next chapter review, which will be another Ned chapter, or I will see you in the videos this week. We got R+L theory tomorrow. The day after that, we're going to be talking about an in-depth more about Benjen and where he is, a bit way more in-depth than what I gave in this video. And then Saturday, we'll be back with our Ned and Ashara reactions. Thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.